Iran firing missiles at Israel. Americans in the southeast still trying to find drinking water, and a massive strike at dozens of our nation's ports. Welcome to October. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation. And we begin tonight with a live look here in the Big Apple, New York City. That is just outside the spin room. As about 3 hours from this very moment, the vice presidential hopefuls, J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, are set to debate. War in the Middle East, chaos along our East Coast, just part of the backdrop this evening. A live look right now inside Israel tonight, our strongest ally in the Middle East, fending off a ballistic missile attack from Iran earlier today. Back at home, a live look right now outside Asheville, North Carolina. Power and water in some spots, likely not coming back online for weeks after the historic and deadly Hurricane Helene. And tonight, some 45,000 dock workers are now on strike, shutting down ports from New England all the way down the East Coast and across to Texas. Your food, your medicine, now needing a new way to get into the country. Welcome to Washington tonight. I'm Blake Berman. That is just part of the backdrop here on October 1st. We often mention the possible October surprise in a presidential race. Is it any of those, or is it still TBD? Our Brooke Schaefer is live in North Carolina this evening. Joe Khalil on how the White House is responding to the Iranian attack on Israel. But we begin tonight with our Robert Sherman, who witnessed those missiles firsthand earlier today in Israel. Robert is in Haifa this evening for us tonight. Robert?
Blake, it was pretty clear from the get-go that this attack from Iran was going to be very different than anything that we'd seen before. And the first telltale sign of that were the alerts that we had gotten on our phones. People here in Israel carry around apps on their cell phones that let them know when an attack is coming and what regions will be under fire potentially. But the alerts that you saw come across our phone, pin drops all over the country. We have never seen anything like this before. And you have the image. It would be great to show that right there. We have never seen that many alerts going off at one particular time. Millions of Israelis rushing to shelters, spending their evenings there. But then we saw the missiles come into our line of sight ourselves. For us, it was actually coming over Israel, and you saw the interceptions, the massive orbs of light and explosions and the rumbles that came with that as well. Despite the magnitude of the attack, the Israelis say no casualties on the ground in Israel itself. But now the entire world's focus is on the Middle East, and one question: what comes next? Israel says they cannot let this go unpunished. Iran says if Israel strikes, they will hit back harder. You have many people watching this region right now hoping that the situation doesn't spiral out of control. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman live for us tonight in Israel. Robert, thank you. Back here in Washington, the Pentagon saying today that Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, and United States naval ships helped shoot down those inbound missiles. President Biden's national security advisor described the attack as a significant escalation, adding that there will be severe consequences. But the president says the attack was thwarted.
The attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. The United States is fully supportive of Israel.
Now, out on the campaign trail today in Wisconsin, Donald Trump criticized the current administration.
I've been talking about World War III for a long time. They are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president.
Our Joe Khalil was at the White House all day today as these events unfolded. Joe, hello. Nice to see you. What was the feeling there inside the White House as the administration, between the Pentagon and the briefing room and all across the administration today? What's sort of the sense that you got as to how they're going to deal with this going forward?
Well, the sense is this is even more complicated moving forward because of the relationship between Bibi and President Biden. First of all, the White House made very clear. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister. They made clear. It wasn't just President Biden, by the way. They made clear to us it was also Vice President Harris in the Situation Room in real time watching as this all played out, right? But what's very important is that moving forward, you got to listen to what they are saying and what they're not saying. The White House is not saying yet what is next for Israel, what their next move is in terms of offensive toward Iran, and whether the United States is going to have a role in that.
And that's a big question, right? I mean, we saw Donald Trump take out Qasem Soleimani.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder what the line is for the Biden administration.
Yeah, they're on the same page as the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, when it comes to defensive operations, obviously. And we saw that very much today. But offensively, we simply don't know, because they are not at all on the same page there. The Biden administration continues to criticize Prime Minister Netanyahu for his posture in Lebanon, for what's happening in Gaza, and his posture toward Iran more generally. So you're going to have to watch how they work together. That is the context here, and we'll learn more as the days and weeks unfold here.
Joe Khalil, inside the White House all day, here with us on Capitol Hill. Joe, thank you. Yep. All right, meantime, tonight, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu being quoted as saying, quote, "Iran made a big mistake, and it will pay." Joining us now here on the Hill, Morgan Ortagus, former State Department spokesperson, founder of Polaris National Security. She has been to Israel dozens of times, interviewed the Prime Minister earlier this year. Morgan, thanks for being with us once again here on the Hill. Next steps, what do you think that looks like? Let's start with Israel.
Well, I was just listening to Joe's report, and I think that he really hit the nail on the head. It doesn't appear that this administration knows they are in totally different places with our ally, not only with Israel, but by the way, this is a similar situation that happened with Ukraine in the Kursk offensive. What we're finding out is that most of these operations, whether it's Israel and the operations they've conducted in the last 2 weeks, or even Ukraine with the Kursk operation, they did not notify the administration until basically the operation was ongoing. So you have to ask yourself, in both the case of Israel and Ukraine, why do our allies and friends feel like that they cannot share this information with the administration? My analysis would be for a few reasons. One, I think that there's a lot of leaks that come out of the administration. The small ground offensive in Lebanon, for example, when they did tell the administration, was in the media right away. So I think there's a concern about leaks, but I think the broader concern is both the Ukrainians and the Israelis get told no by this administration a lot, and they sort of micromanage their operation from Washington. And I don't think either ally or friend has wanted their war micromanaged by the Biden-Harris administration. That's a really odd place to be in. I can tell you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just going to ask. So, where do you think the Biden administration goes from here, as you just mentioned them?
I will tell you, I did think that Jake Sullivan's press conference was good today. Obviously, I've had enormous disagreements with the Biden administration over how they've handled Iran policy for 4 years. However, Jake Sullivan, as you noted, said that this was very escalatory from the Iran. They put the onus on Iran. Listen, we can't get used to the fact that in April, similar today, Iran really broke the seal. They crossed the Rubicon. In April, it was the first time that you saw an attack that emanated from inside Iran to inside Israel. That really can't be normalized. Just because we have enormous capability from our U.S. Navy ships in the region, thank God for that. And they have the capability to help Israel shoot this down with Israel's own capabilities, of course. But just because we're good at thwarting what the Iranians tried doesn't negate what the Iranians tried to do. Today, they tried to kill Israeli and American citizens in Israel today. They're specifically attacking inside Israel. This is an act of war. Israel did not attack Iran. Israel went after a designated terrorist group, Hezbollah, and they took out the heads and the leadership of Hezbollah. So this is an unprovoked act of war by Iran. And Jake Sullivan was right whenever he put the onus and the condemnation on Iran. Unfortunately, they have 4 years of bad policies towards Iran, which is the chickens coming home to roost.
Let me leave you with this, Morgan, on the Iranian front. And you mentioned back in April with the drone strikes that were attempted towards Israel. It was that, and then
ballistic missiles.
It was that, and then it sort of, I don't want to say went away, but there was that wave, and it was then on to the next thing, sort of the next front in this battle with Iran. And now we saw what we saw earlier today over the skies of Israel for a handful of minutes or so. And I wonder, Morgan, if you think that this was the first of many waves to come, or if it was sort of message sent by Iran, and that's where they leave it.
So it's important to note in in April, after this happened, after that attack was, what some people didn't think was as significant as it could have been for a myriad of reasons. Biden told Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, quote unquote, to take the win, sort of let it go. Iran made their point. They weren't successful. Let it go. I didn't think that was the proper response that Israel should have taken. But, Bibi's decided to listen to Biden's advice. I would urge him not to do that this time. I don't think that's right. And I don't think that's where the Israelis are. I would be shocked if we don't see a response from Israel within the coming days, within the coming week. I think when they took this action against Hezbollah, they knew it might provoke a response from Iran. And I think they have Iran options ready. And by the way, there's a lot of talk about what could happen. There's a lot of options on the table, but I don't think Israel's going to take the most obvious options if they decide, for example, to go after the Iranian nuclear program. We've seen, especially with the pager bombers and the walkie-talkie bombs, that they have a lot of tricks up their sleeve.
Morgan Ortagus, former State Department spokesperson, thanks for being with us tonight here on The Hill. Talk to you soon. Appreciate it, Morgan.
Sure.
All right,
Thank you.
You got it. All right, turning our attention now to the tragedy and recovery in North Carolina. The death toll from Helene now stands at more than 150. Cadaver dogs, search crews traveling through the muck and debris in the Tar Heel State looking for victims. Our Brooke Schaefer is on the ground in the devastated area of North Carolina. Brooke tonight is just outside of Asheville, where she was last evening and has been throughout the day. Brooke, I've been watching your reporting. I've been following your reporting. One of the things that strikes me here is that they might not have water, or at least water systems up and running for weeks in Western Carolina.
Yeah, right now, Blake, no timeline on when they will get things back, like, power, cell phone service, running water. These are things that, I think people don't really think about oftentimes when you look at devastation like this, that people will have to live with this for weeks potentially. Look at some of the devastation they're dealing with here, Blake. We've got roads that are washed away. Over here on the other side of the street, that you can even see cars that were picked up during this storm and are now still stacked on top of each other. Throughout the day today, Blake, just outside of Asheville, we have seen several helicopters up in the air. They have been continuing search and rescue today. But of course, without things like cell service and with so many blocked roads, we still don't have an official number on how many people might be missing. But today I have spoken with a couple people who survived this storm, including a mom who told me that her house was washed away in the storm. She told me it is gone, like it was never even there to begin with. Then I talked to another lady who told me, she feels lucky that her house is standing, but she said the town that she lives in is now almost unrecognized. The death toll from this storm has continued to climb and is expected to continue. Right now, sitting at about 150 people so far have died from this storm across the southeast. In this county, though, alone, local officials saying that 57 people have died. Blake.
Our Brooke Schaefer live for us in North Carolina tonight. As you could hear Brooke sort of come in and out there the last 15 seconds or so, we have big boosters to help with our internet reception. And that is how Brooke is able to communicate with us tonight. As you heard from her there, power is a big issue, and internet reception as well. Brooke, thank you. All right, out now to the campaign trail. Live look, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Former President Donald Trump set to speak any moments from now there from the state of Wisconsin. And to the spin room in the Big Apple. We are less than 3 hours away from the first and only vice presidential debate, possibly the last debate of this presidential cycle, at least at that level. Joining me now here on The Hill, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill, and Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Hello to you both.
Hey.
Nice to have you all in. That's the backdrop, right? Missiles fired at Israel today, our strongest ally in the Middle East. You just saw Brooke out there in North Carolina. The port strike, where you now have some 36 ports that are basically offline that are not delivering goods through the eastern part of the country. Bob, we often ask, what's the October surprise? What's it going to be? Here we are, October 1st, and that's the backdrop for this vice presidential debate tonight.
Yeah, I mean, tragic news in many ways with the war and of course, so many people still missing in North Carolina, and it's affecting everybody. My daughter goes to Virginia Tech, and they can't drink the water, and you can't get water because everyone has bought water. I mean, it is not, and that's 200 miles away from Nashville.
Right.
So all of these events, none of them are good for the Biden administration because Trump, as he's just put out a press release saying, a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen if I were president. Now, obviously not natural disasters, but he can say, I would have done a better job.
Live look at the sort of debate hall spin room area. What are the risks, Julia, for these campaigns tonight?
Look, I think the risks right now for J.D. Vance and Tim Walz is really how they address this. I think, the events of today and the developments have put maybe a new kind of stake on the VP debate. Normally, I think we look at these vice presidential debates as not as forums that don't necessarily matter because voters aren't necessarily voting.
Choosing for the VP.
They're not choosing them. But at the same time, they're the ones who are going to be out and center today responding to the news of the day.
Right.
We saw that Kamala Harris was out and center today talking about this. But I think you're going to hear both of these campaigns offer their own visions as to how a Trump administration or a Harris administration would approach this.
Both are very good debaters. I've watched their old debates. I think it's going to get nasty tonight, without a doubt. And I don't think it matters that much other than momentum. I mean, Harris has had the momentum. Harris won the first debate. So the pressure, I think, is on Vance to pick his team up.
It's kind of remarkable that the vice presidents might get the last word. Right? Because there's not another debate scheduled between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And for the average person who's just sort of checking in, they say, oh, there's a debate tonight. And this, I mean, look, we're like following this stuff hour by hour. But for the average person, this might be their last sort of view of both sides together.
Yeah, and it's been interesting watching these two men in their media strategies or their campaign's media strategies. Look, I think J.D. Vance has been smart to really put himself out there, including on outlets that may be perceived as unfriendly towards him and the Trump campaign. I think it's been really good practice for him. For Tim Walz, though, I think the stakes are particularly high because he hasn't been in uncontrolled environments. He's been in these very friendly...
They're sheltering him.
Exactly. And he's not someone who has been on the national stage for that long. This is a big test for him.
All right, so I want to show you something that I noticed, by the way, as we look at the bottom right of your screen. Donald Trump will be speaking any moment now in Wisconsin. When that happens, we'll take you there live. Obviously, the big story today, well beyond this debate, was the ongoing situation in Israel and in the Middle East. The White House made it known that Kamala Harris, the vice president, was in the room at the table with the commander-in-chief. Show the image from earlier today. This was put out by the official White House account, and I looked at that and I said, man, that looks, perfectly framed. There's Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, and we'd been talking about what happened in Iran and over Israel with Iran in April. So I thought to myself, what was the picture that came out at around April? Show that picture. When President Biden was at the top of the ticket. Who's missing? Kamala Harris. The poll report from that day notes how she was via secure remote. There's plenty of they are not shy to put sort of that secure remote picture up there. The point is, Bob, that when President Biden was running, he was front and center, and now the White House wants to let you know that she's there, she's in the room, and she's trying to make she's alongside.
No, it's an astute observation, Blake. And listen, think about Afghanistan too. That's a tricky one for them, where the Harris people are saying, well, no, she was involved, but they don't want to be too close to that. But other people in the room said, actually, she wasn't. So
they literally are trying to show you that she's in the middle of it.
Visuals matter in politics, and there you go.
All right, still to come here on the Hill. Thank you both. Back later in the show. Appreciate it. Live look, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Donald Trump set to speak any moment now before the VP debate. What should we expect tonight? Trump's former campaign manager joins us on the other side of the break. Plus, we're taking you live to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our swing state spotlight focusing tonight on part of the American dream. Hello from Washington. We're live across the country. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Live look right now, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Donald Trump, just a moment ago, walked up to the podium there. This is the sort of, I guess, the last time today, at least, that we're going to hear from Trump before the big vice presidential debate this evening, set for about 2.5 hours from now. Donald Trump in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Let's listen live here for a moment on the Hill.
Clapping because it was very impressive. No, I was impressed, actually. But now, a lot of respect. We have to be together. Before we begin, I want to send our love to the millions of people who are still suffering from the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Yesterday, I was in Georgia to survey the terrible damage from the storm. It was terrible. And Georgia was hit very, very hard. They're doing a great job. Governor's doing a great job. Everybody, they're all working together. And we helped them out a little bit. In North Carolina, the biggest problem seems to be like zero communication. The poles are all down. The wires are all down. And they asked me whether or not I could help with Starlink. It's another genius concept of Elon Musk. And I called Elon, and they were having a hard time getting it. It's a hot thing. And Elon immediately got involved. And we have the most incredible that they did in one day. They got tremendous communication. They went from literally no communication to tremendous. So I want to thank Elon Musk for what he's done in North Carolina. A little bit help in Georgia, too. We had some areas that had a hard time with communication. He hooked it up to the satellites, which he feels very confident in doing. He likes satellites, he likes rocket ships, satellites, and there's nobody better. He's something. He's a piece of work, I'll tell you. But he had it done in about 15 seconds. He said, look, it goes right up to the satellite. It's already back down. And they had so much, they had such great communication so rapidly. It's incredible, actually. And the situation in western North Carolina is very catastrophic, very bad. And they don't even realize the extent of it yet. A lot of people are missing. But we're going to be working with them, with North Carolina. Great people, great state. And we're working very hard with them to make sure that that it works out as well as it can. Amazingly, this is one of the biggest hurricanes anyone's ever seen. It's late in the season, very unusual. I guess the water was 20 feet high. And nobody expects that. People go up to their house and they think they're safe on the second floor, and they weren't safe. This was one of they call it the waterfalls. This was one of the biggest they've ever seen, so it's too bad. Very late in the season, too. You almost don't even think of it as hurricane season. Our hearts break for every family that has lost a home, and they've lost so much. They've lost everything in many cases. A lot of people don't have insurance. And we have to come together as neighbors and friends and fellow citizens to support those in need. And there's a lot of those in need right now. Unfortunately, I look forward to being back in North Carolina and Georgia very soon. And also Tennessee and Alabama. We had some big damage, but North Carolina was really hit. So we're going to work with them very hard and hopefully help them. We're here today to talk about how we're going to rescue American families from the nightmare of the Harris-Biden administration and launch a new generation of golden age for America. You know what's going on with the schools in our country. Not a good situation. Since Kamala Harris cast the deciding votes on the bills that caused the worst inflation in American history by far, by the way. Higher prices, of course, the typical American family over $29,000. And you're continuing to pay $1,100 every single month, more than you were doing before. Nobody can afford that. Even if you get a salary increase, it's nothing compared to the kind of numbers you're talking about. Inflation is devastation. Inflation is country busting. It breaks countries. Look at Germany from centuries ago. Look at other countries, whether it's centuries ago or decades ago. Any country that goes through inflation, and we went through a really bad period. We're the worst in our history. 8.4 million Americans are now working second jobs, the highest in more than 38 years. And you now have to make $111,000 a year. That's a lot of money to afford an average home. A 46% increase since when I was president, so it's 46% higher. And that's not even including the cost of interest, because interest went from 2% to 11%. And you can't get the money at 11%, so it's not 11, it's a lot higher than that. With a colossal big government negotiations, Kamala Harris, who destroyed San Francisco and destroyed California. San Francisco is the best city in the country 18, 19 years ago. Bob Tisch, a friend of mine from Lowe's, many of you know Bob Tisch, he said it was the best city in the country. He was a businessman that had holdings all over. He said San Francisco was the best. He wouldn't believe it. He passed away a number of years ago, but he wouldn't believe what's happened to it. And he's also added an estimated $6,300 a year in regulatory costs onto the backs of every American family. So Kamala Harris has done this, and she's done it at a level like nobody's ever seen, with the help of Joe Biden. But I'm not sure Joe was involved, because I'm not sure he was involved in anything, to be honest with you. Now Kamala is coming back for more. So she ruins San Francisco. She ruins the state of California. And now she's coming back to destroy the United States of America, but we're not going to let it happen. As you know, she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor who nobody has spoken to. I'd love to talk to him. I would be interested in talking to him, actually. But we can't let this happen. We were way up on Biden, 21 points up on Biden after the debate. And they had a coup. They told him, you're not going to run. And he's not a happy man. He's pretending he's happy, but they took him out. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes. She was the first one that got broken in the primaries. She never made it to Iowa. She was the first one out. And now she's running. The whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense. She had many people that did much better. They had 22 people running. And she was the first one out. She went in and she went out because people didn't like her. She wasn't good. And now she's the one that's representing the party, and the press gives her a free pass. And that's a little ridiculous, isn't it? Huh? But also never happened where we spent over $100 million on fighting Joe Biden, and then all of a sudden we're fighting somebody else. That's like a fight. The fighter's doing badly, and you say, okay, let's take him out and give somebody else a chance to win in the middle of the fight. So Kamala's plan is projected to raise the typical family's taxes by $2,600. And the tax queen, you know, they called her the tax queen in California because she liked taxes. I've never seen anyone win a race where they raise taxes all the time, but she liked taxes. This is definitely a unique election anyway. The tax queen also wants the largest small business tax hike in history and a 33% tax hike on American small businesses, which will send consumer prices skyrocketing. You think they're bad now. If Kamala gets 4 more years, she will crush family budgets with crippling energy costs thanks to her Green New Scam. The Green New Scam is one of the greatest, most difficult things to be watching. The real number they want is $93 trillion. They want buildings taken down and new buildings built without windows because it's more efficient. Let's do that. Let's just tell people you have a beautiful apartment, but you don't have any windows. It's one of the great scams. But, you know, the amazing thing is that nobody talks about it anymore. They're not talking about the Green New Deal anymore. They're not talking about environmental anymore. They're not talking about the oceans will rise by 1/16 of an inch over the next 400 years. They don't talk about it anymore. Something's happened. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's not selling too well anymore. They call it now climate change because global warming wasn't working because the planet's actually gotten a little bit cooler recently. But climate change covers everything. It can rain, it can be dry, it can be hot, it can be cold. Climate change, everything is. Look, and I believe I really am an environmentalist. I've gotten environmental awards, but I want clean, beautiful air and clean, beautiful water. That's all, crystal clean water. And we want clean air. And, you know, during the last 2 years of my administration, we had the best on record. And we had a lot of drill, baby drill. We had a lot of drilling, but we had the best on record. My plan will cut energy prices in half. Within 12 months, we're going to have energy prices for businesses, but in my opinion, maybe even more importantly for the average household, I said by 12 months from January 20th, which is the day we go into office, I hope we have a country left because what's going on now is very dangerous. I've been talking about World War III. What's going on now between Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East blowing up all over the place. It's a very dangerous time, most dangerous time since the end of World War II, without even question. But my plan will cut energy prices in half. I'm going to knock it out 50%, all. This is for families and businesses and everything. And with the artificial intelligence, as you know, and shocking, but you need more energy to make that competitive with China and some others, but primarily China. They're going wild now. They're building tremendous electric capacity, as you know, but you need more electricity. They have to create tremendous amounts of electricity in order to compete, and more than we have right now for the whole country. So you have to more than double up what we have right now to be competitive. And we'll be able to do that. I'll be able to do that. They won't be able to do it. You have to make sure your environmental impact statements get approved very quickly. Otherwise, you'll never be able to compete. They don't do environmental impact statements in China, to the best of my knowledge. They have one man say, yeah, you can build it, and that's the end of that. That was the environmental impact statement. We have to go through sometimes years of things, but all of that's going to be rapidly expedited. It's going to save you thousands of dollars on gasoline and home heating and air conditioning and electricity. We're going to be down for the entire energy package. You will be down by a minimum of 50% 1 year after January 20th. Nobody else will say that, but I can do that because we have more liquid gold under our feet than any other country. And I know how to use it. We had it going so well, and now we're buying oil from Venezuela and lots of other places that we shouldn't be buying. I call it Venezuelan tar, because essentially it's tar. You know, it's they have the places that they hone it and develop it is right in the middle of Houston. Right in the middle of Houston, we have a refinery that only does that oil. It's the only one in the world that does that oil. Because it's not oil, it's tar. And if you're an environmentalist and you like Texas, because I love Texas, we just got a poll from Texas. We're through the roof in Texas, which I love because I think it's an incredible place. But if you're an environmental person, the tar and all of the other things coming out of those chimneys and in that wonderful place, the only place in the entire world that does Venezuelan, I call it Venezuelan tar. But there's no reason for us to be doing it because we have more oil and gas. We have more, I say liquid gold, because I think it's the best expression. We have more liquid gold than Russia, Saudi Arabia, any other country in the world, and we don't even use it. And ours is pure. Perhaps worst of all, Kamala's mass migrant invasion will destroy our economy, importing tens of millions of, think of it, more illegal aliens than we've ever even thought about taking in. And for me to watch her the other night standing up at a television set saying, with a news conference saying how she's going to all of a sudden get involved at the border. Well, she was the border czar. She did a horrible job. She allowed 21 million plus people to come in, and many of them, and you've heard me say this many times, they came from prisons and jails. They came from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they came from terrorist camps, where they trained them to come into the United States, and they come into the United States. Many, many terrorists. We have more terrorists come into the United States in the last 3 years than we have had in the last 30 years. And these are the real terrorists. These are the real ones. We have no idea who they are. They let them come in, just open borders, just the dumbest thing I've ever seen, other than if you're trying to sign them up to vote, which is what they're trying to do. Kamala grants them all amnesty, and she's promised that it will obliterate. She promised them that they're going into Medicare and Social Security. And if they go into Medicare and Social Security, then she's going to kill Medicare and Social Security. And we're not going to let her do that. And I didn't let anything happen to either of them during my 4 years. We didn't raise the age for Social Security. They're going to end up raising it by 6 or 7 years if they get in. With 4 more years of Kamala, you'll have a 1929 style depression. That's sort of the ultimate depression. 1929 was the worst. You don't get worse than that. And it took 25 years to recover, frankly. You know, people say, oh, we recovered with Roosevelt. No, it took 25 years to recover from it. And it was tremendous pain and suffering. And that's going to happen again. And I've been very good at predicting things. The hat says Trump was right about everything. And it wasn't even my hat. I didn't even do it, but somebody had made a lot of money. Trump was right about everything. But when I win, the next Trump economic boom begins the moment the polls close in Wisconsin on November 5th. And again, Brian and Tommy and all of the people that have been so great here, we're seeing numbers that a lot of people have never seen, real numbers that a lot of people haven't seen, especially as Republicans. They haven't seen because they want to have our country back. They don't want to have millions of people pouring in that are criminals, that are murderers. Think of it. We had 13, and these are numbers that were never announced because they never wanted to do that. They never really talked about these numbers. They've never done it in many years, but they did here. And I think somebody whether it's Border Patrol or Justice, but somebody said it has to be done. It was announced just before she went to the microphone to say that she was going to do a good job at the border. And a lot of people were saying, well, why hasn't she done it in 4 years? Why are you doing a good job now? She's done a horrible job, even where they tried to give it a little bit of a kick 2 months ago, 3 months ago, so they could look a little bit better for the election. They didn't say that they're flying thousands of people over, and those numbers aren't included, or the app, where they have an app that's being used by the cartel leaders, the people that are making billions of dollars. The cartel leaders, think of this, call the app, and they say where to drop the illegal migrants. This is done under their administration. It's nobody's ever seen anything like it. But they said they closed the border, but they didn't say that airplanes are flying over with hundreds of thousands of migrants, dropping them all over the place. And I'll tell you what, the people in these towns are scared. They're scared. Even if they haven't arrived there yet, they're scared. When you take a look at what's happening in Ohio, Springfield, where you have a town of 50,000 people, that's beautiful. It's safe, a great place, idyllic, actually. And now they've, in a short period of time, dropped 32,000 people there. And some of those people are pretty tough people. And the mayor of the town, I don't know him, but he seems like a nice man, but he doesn't want to talk anything. He doesn't want to say anything bad. He wants to be politically correct. And all he says is we're trying to get interpreters because none of the people, virtually none of them speak English. So he's looking for interpreters when he should be looking for people to take them home because this country cannot sustain what's happening to it. We can't sustain hundreds of thousands of people coming in a month or, more importantly, in a short period of time, 21 million plus. We have no idea what it is. You have gotaways. Nobody has any idea, if you include the gotaways, what the number. We can't even really say, you know, with other countries like China, you say it's 1.4 billion. With India, you say it's 1.5 billion. They're big. With us, you don't really know what the number is. You say, how many do we have? Is it 320? Is it 325? Is it 350? Nobody knows. If you go to government agencies, say how many people are in our country, they have no idea. Well, we're going to have an idea very soon. Under my leadership, real median household income rose by $7,684. And that's before the pandemic. And even after the pandemic, the annual income was up $6,400. We did a great job in the pandemic, never got the credit we deserve, but we did an amazing job. Operation Warp Speed is being studied by many, many schools, both militarily and business-wise. Operation Warp Speed, even my greatest enemies, they say, what a job that was. That was a job like nobody else has ever done. And it's ripped the world apart. Every country got ripped apart, including China. China was delayed, but it was hit harder proportionally probably than almost any country. It was a terrible time. Probably $60 trillion in damage. And caused by the Wuhan lab, I said that from the beginning, it came out of Wuhan. And the Wuhan lab, it wasn't from bats in a cave that was 2,000 miles away. It wasn't from Italy. It wasn't from France. They blamed everybody. It's really the China virus. But we did a great job with the ventilators, with the masks and the gowns and everything. You know, when we got here, our cupboards, I used to say our cupboards were bare. We had nothing. No president put anything in for a pandemic, and I don't blame him. Who would have thought? I thought it was sort of an ancient thing. It wouldn't happen now. So it wasn't, something that I ever mentioned very much. I didn't blame other presidents, but they didn't put anything into it. So we had the cupboards were bare, and all of a sudden we heard there's something coming from China, and terrible. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We gave you the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country and the biggest regulation cuts by far in the history of our country, and rebuilt our military. But a lot of that, not relatively speaking maybe, but a big chunk went to Afghanistan, where they're one of the biggest sellers of military equipment now in the world. And what I say is the most embarrassing moment in the history of the United States, that we took the soldiers out first. You're supposed to take the soldiers out last. A child would know that. I brought a child up to the dais once, and I gave him the facts in front of a very big crowd of maybe 10,000 people, maybe more. I gave him the facts. I said, so would you take the military out first or last? He said, I take the military out last, sir. He was 5 years old. I said, how old are you? He said, 5. A lot of you saw that. As president, I will deliver gigantic tax cuts for working families, and we will have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our seniors. And that's a very big thing, but especially the last one for our seniors, because they've been decimated. Young people have too, but they've been decimated, seniors, on their fixed incomes. But nobody's ever been hurt more. Nobody has been hurt more than seniors with respect to inflation. Inflation has just absolutely destroyed seniors. So I'm giving them no tax on Social Security benefits, and that'll make up for some of it. This was all created by Biden and Harris, although nobody knows, when I say Harris, nobody knows who I'm talking about. So Kamala. And while working Americans catch up, we're going to put a temporary cap on credit card interest rates of 10%, because those rates are going up to 22, 24, 26%. And it's not sustainable. It's not fair. So it'll be temporary, but we have to help people. They can't pay those rates. We're going to unleash American energy, drive the prices way down. We're going to stop the people from pouring into our border. We're going to have a mass deportation of criminals. We have to get the criminals out of our country. They're not going to help us. Again, you had 13,000, more than 13,000, to be exact, 13,099. These are murderers. These are murderers that have murdered, in many cases, about 30% of the cases, more than one person. And in some cases, more than 5 people. These are real murderers. These make our bad people look like innocent people. I know a lot of the talk from the radical left people was, well, these immigrants don't commit crime. No, these people are among the worst in the world. They come from the Congo in Africa. Many people from the Congo. I don't know what that is, but they come out of jails in the Congo. You know, they're letting their jail population come into the United States. Their jails are being emptied into the United States. Their gang members are being taken out of Caracas, Venezuela, and lots of other places, which was a rough city, very dangerous city. And they're being delivered into the United States. They're gang members. And these are tough gang members. You see what's happening in Aurora, in Colorado. The mayor is petrified. He doesn't, I mean, he's petrified, but the governor is a mess. He doesn't know what the hell. He's a Democrat liberal. And they're taking over real estate, lots of real estate. The governor doesn't know what to do. And, you know, they want to be politically correct. They don't want to say anything. They're so afraid of saying anything and offending anybody. They have to go in. They have to get them out. But when you look at what's happened in Aurora and Colorado, it's incredible. And Springfield is unbelievable. Again, a beautiful community. And now, almost immediately, 32,000 more people. And these are people that have had a rough life, too. They're tough. Some of them are real tough. But they've had a rough life. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. People in Springfield are moving out. They have to move out. They're not going to be able to live there. I'm going to appoint Elon Musk, who's a fantastic guy, to lead a government efficiency commission tasked with saving trillions of dollars in fraud, waste, and abuse, and driving down inflation and driving down costs. We have tremendous fat. I mean, just one example. When I came in, I was asked by Boeing to sign a contract for the purchase of a new Air Force One, and which is actually 2 planes. A lot of people don't know it. In a way, it's 4 planes because it's sort of Air Force One becomes the plane that the president uses. And I was asked to do it, and I was able to cut $1.6 billion off the deal without any changes, except I was giving it a better-looking paint job. And we ordered new ones, because we have Air Force One is 32 years old, 2 planes, 32 years old. And you'd come and you'd land it next to some of these planes from Saudi Arabia and a lot of other places, United Arab Emirates is a beauty. But you'd land the plane, and the plane looked awfully shabby. It was time, 32 years old, so I got new ones. But I came in, and they asked me to sign a $5.6 or $5.7 billion contract. Now, they're very special planes, because it's like, people hear billions for airplanes, but they're very special. I can't even say you why, but I can't tell you that. I'm not supposed to. But they are very expensive but incredible planes from Boeing. And I said, I'm not going to sign it. It's too much. And Boeing came back and they cut $400 million off just by my saying that. And I said, nope, it's too high. It has to have a 3 in the front of it. It has to have a 3 because this was a 5, right? 5.6, 5.7 billion. I said, nope, it's too high. And they called back a week later, and they took another $250 million off. So I got $650 million with like about 2 minutes of conversation. I said, no, I'm not doing it. It has to have a 3. And this went on for about a month, and I sort of forgot about it. I said, look, forget it. Well, let's not do it. And lo and behold, about 4 months later, I get a call from Dennis. This was prior to the horrible accidents, the 2 accidents that really hurt Boeing. I mean, it's the greatest company in the world. I think it was thought of as the greatest company in the world, and now it's not considered that. They went down a long way, but this was when it was prime time, Boeing prime time at the beginning of my term. And they said, here's the story, sir. We thought we had a deal at $5.7 billion. We'll do it for $3,999,999.99. 1 penny less than 4. I said, you got a deal. So I saved about $1.6 billion. Same exact plane, nothing different. It's not like, oh, gee, we have cheaper engines, or we have no generation system, or the wings are smaller, or lots of things that you can do to cheapen it up. No, the exact same plane, except we had a much better paint job. And we saved $1.6 billion. And it took me like 3 months. And actually, the last part was the most effective because I gave up on him. And he called up out of the blue. In fact, when he called, I said, the head of Boeing, what the hell does he want? That's always the best way to negotiate when it doesn't matter to you so much, right? I said, what does he want? And then he said, the plane that we've been talking about a few months ago? Yeah, tell me about it. That's when he made the best offer. So we saved $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion for that. I said, so you're going to make $1.7 billion to build an airplane? That was the way I looked at it. And you have so much. Elon Musk is a master of that, and he's so into it because he loves the country so much. He endorsed me with the warmest endorsement. He thinks it's very important that I win because we're going to save our country. If these people win, we're not going to have a country. But we're going to have Elon do it, and he'll be able to save, I think, trillions of dollars. I really do. I think trillions of dollars, and nobody in the country will feel.
All right, so we've been listening to Donald Trump live in the swing state of Wisconsin here on the Hill. You've seen on part of your screen Donald Trump as he speaks right now. The other part of the screen, of course, the big event later tonight. It's not often you can sort of upstage Donald Trump, but that's exactly what's going to happen later tonight as we are about 2 hours and 8 minutes away until Tim Walz, J.D. Vance on the stage together, face to face, perhaps the last debate at the presidential election level for this cycle. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins me on the other side of the break. Stay with us. You've been watching here on The Hill on NewsNation. You know, I always get this question, Leland, and I'm sure you do too, from friends, family, whoever. And it is, if the election were to start, who do you think is going to win the presidential race, right? Mm-hmm. And my stock answer is always, I don't know what the world is going to look like in October. Circle back to me in October, and I'll tell you, we'll know what the world looks like, and let's chat then. Here we are on October 1st, and my goodness, you had Iran sending ballistic missiles into Israel. We have absolute devastation in North Carolina, a swing state, by the way. And you had some 45,000 workers all across the East Coast, from New England to Florida, out west to Texas today, go on strike and shut down the ports, meaning there is now a different way that suppliers are trying to send in food, medicine, and everything in between. And that's the backdrop here on October 1st.
I think they call it the October surprise, right? Which, interestingly enough, I almost wonder if you read my lead in the teleprompter, Blake, because this is what we're starting with, okay? But I think you make a very good point, because it's the point I'm about to make. That the amount of things that are changing right now, and what that means is it only raises the stakes, right? It's very rare that we enter into October and the race is very